Hello everyone, this is Mike and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to be building a GUI-based PowerShell script to query a remote computer to find out some information about it. So the concept here is this is something that maybe help desk folks would use if they wanted to reach out to a computer that's currently online and find out things like the modeled, the make and model of it, the operating system, maybe the drive free space, the amount of RAM, things like that. Something that a help desk person might be interested in if maybe they have, a particular user calling in with a problem and they would just want to get some facts about the computer. So we're going to sketch out a GUI to do this in Visual Studio. We're going to convert the design over to PowerShell. We're going to be using Windows Forms or .NET Forms, I guess, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to be converting that Visual Studio design into a PowerShell script using the ConvertForm module, which is freely available online. It's out on GitHub if anybody wants to go have a glance at it. So if you're not familiar with it, I go through the how to install it, how to get it in a previous video of mine, building a GUI-based PowerShell script using Free Tools Method 1. The Method 1's very specific there. I have two different methods for making graphical PowerShell scripts. So Method 1 is utilizing this method. So of the two that I have outlined, I have Method 1, Method 2. I prefer Method 1 because I'm using the straight .NET Forms library, which has more options into it than the forms that come with Windows Presentation Foundation and kind of the XAML code that produces. So have a look at that video for information if you want to go get the ConvertForm module. Right. Now, it does not come from like the PowerShell gallery. It comes from a different PowerShell repository out there. If you're not particularly happy with that, the only thing you need the ConvertForm module for is just to initially make the PowerShell script. Once that's done, the PowerShell script can run perfectly fine standalone. You don't need that module anymore. So you could maybe have that on a test computer, something that's isolated, copy a script over, copy the Visual Studio design file over to it, do the conversion, then move the completed script back off of it. And so it doesn't need to be something that's on a production computer in your environment to run any of these, the scripts that we're going to make. So just needed to do that initial conversion of the Visual Studio design over to basically the correct .NET objects on the PowerShell script, as you'll see. Right? Then we're going to put the logic in to query the actual remote computer. So I happen to be using the query method that hits the management repository on a remote computer, which is a database-like object that lives on every computer, every Windows computer anyway, since like NT4 days. And two different protocols you can use to query it with. You have SIM or WMI. WMI is more like the legacy protocol. It's part of the RPC family and uses the RPC ports to do it. And SIM is part of the newer kind of remote management protocol, WSMAN, Web Services for Management, that not just Windows supports, but pretty much all of the other mainstream OSs do. Uh, so so SIM would be the one that uses that. So the nifty thing about SIM is it's available if the remote computer has PowerShell remoting enabled on it. So in my particular environment, that's the scenario I'm going with. So let's say PowerShell remoting is enabled on all of these computers. Okay. So if it's not, you might have to use WMI. We'll put options for this in the script, so you could pick either or. But again, WMI is not open by default either on a Windows computer, so you would need to make sure that that was open as well. So if your company happens to use maybe like System Center Configuration Manager, SCCM, that uses WMI as well to do its job. So if you're an SCCM shop, maybe WMI would be the better protocol to use. All right. So let's get started with this. So I'm going to flip over to my VM here, and I've got nothing going on at the moment. So let's start up Visual Studio. And I am working on a server. I know I probably shouldn't do that, but my lab environment, that's just where I happen to have Visual Studio installed. This could be installed on a workstation, I don't know, wherever you want to do it. So let's create a project. Template, I can just type in forms in there. And I want this one right here. The Windows Forms app. Hit next. We'll give it a name. Maybe we'll call this query 1, something like that. I'll put it in my C:projects folder, which, if it's not empty, should be empty. Let's see what's in here. Yep, okay, so that is empty at the moment. Okay, so I'll put it in projects, go ahead and select create. Okay, so we're in here initially to sketch out the form. All right, that's all I'm really doing, or what I'm using Visual Studio for. All right. So when you first start it up, I have my Visual Studio set up a particular way. I have the toolbox as pinned to the left side here. I have the whole properties window on the right side. When you start it up, you might have Solutions Explorer sharing the right side with the properties area, and I don't really use Solutions Explorer, so I normally just close that, and that gives the properties window here a little more real estate because there's a lot of properties. Um, all right, so first things first, as you can see, my my GUI interface here is labeled as Form 1. All right, so we may want to change that up. If you don't particularly like that. So for instance, the text, I probably don't want it called Form 1. Maybe helpdesk query tool, something like that. And that now changes that. And also, do I really want it called Form 1? Maybe, query, or something like that. Query 1. How about that? All right, so we name it to something else, and maybe capitalize it just to make it look fancy. All right. And the last thing that I'd probably look at on the form itself would be this one right here where it says locked. That's false. If you don't want the window to be resizable, you could go set that to be true. And so the size of the window in the form becomes locked. So I don't know how big a form I'm going to need at the moment. So I'm not going to lock it at the moment. And also when I ultimately, finish everything up, I don't really care. If they want to resize the window that it launches in, I mean, help themselves. It's not going to ruin anything. So now we need to start dropping some stuff in. All right, so I'm going to need a few checkboxes. I'm going to need a couple radio buttons. I'm going to need a couple text boxes, labels, things like that. So let's maybe start with our first thing here. So maybe I'll throw, let's maybe just do the common forms here. Let's take a label and we'll maybe, drop that in. All right. So label, I certainly don't want it called label 1. So I could go down onto the properties window here. And the name of it, I don't really care if it's label 1 for the name in all honesty, but the text, I don't want that. All right, so this would be computer name. So that's where they're going to enter the computer that they want to query. Scroll up a bit, find font, and change the font to something bigger than, let's say, 8.25. So maybe I want, I don't know, how's 12 look? Maybe a little bigger. Let's do a 16 font. Okay, that looks nice. Okay, so we got computer name there. I'm probably going to want a text box for someone to enter the computer name in. Right, maybe set the length to it. And again, I could adjust the font on that. So maybe I'll take a 12 font on that. And if I wanted to, I could customize the font itself if I want to pick, like a different font. For instance, like if you're used to doing PowerShell, like I really like Console, right? That used to be the font of choice into there, so maybe I'll pick that. And I need to give this a name. So notice the name down here, it's text box 1. So maybe, uh, you know, maybe just call it computer name. Okay? That's the name of that. So basically what's going to happen is the name of the element will become a variable in PowerShell. Okay, so you probably want that to be somewhat descriptive. Right? So we've got our computer name in there. So next, we're probably going to want to put a few checkboxes in there for the different pieces of information that I want to query. So I could see checkboxes here, so I can go maybe put those on the right side over here. And again, there's no, let's say right or wrong way to do this. It's probably just how you might want to do the design. Right. So yeah, so we've got some checkboxes. And if I wanted to, I could leave them as checkbox 1, checkbox 2, checkbox 3. So basically, like I'm going to be querying, or I'm going to give the help desk people the option to query, let's see, yeah, more consistent, 3 different pieces of information: operating system, the computer hardware, and the hard disk info. So I could label these instead of checkbox 1, checkbox 2, checkbox 3, we probably want to adjust the text. So that would be OS info. Okay, so that's checkbox 1. Um, checkbox 2, what do I want the text to be? So that'll be computer info. And then maybe checkbox 3, we'll set the text to be disk info. All right. So something like that. And then, oops. So then we'll come down here and the name, if you want to leave them checkbox 1, 2, and 3, I suppose that's fine. I'll just call them OS check. Oop, no, that's disk check. Never mind. That's one I've highlighted at the moment. And then this one, checkbox 2, that'll be comp check. And then lastly, this one here will be OS check. Okay, so make sure that went through. Name, OS check. Okay. And then lastly here, I probably want to adjust the font for each of them. So maybe change the font information instead of 8.5. Maybe I want like a 12 font. And again, if you have a font of choice, yeah, go ahead and use that. All right, so I know that looks kind of weird, but I'm going with it. So it's the beauty of making your own graphical. You can kind of do whatever you like. So next thing, I want to put in a couple of radio buttons for picking the protocol. So we could throw another label up there, and maybe we'll call this, let's adjust the font size. Maybe that'll be another 16 font. And then the text, certainly I don't want to call it label 2. Maybe we'll call it protocol. And then we'll dump in some radio buttons. So I see a radio button here. And radio button there. All right. And those are certainly way too small. So let's, again, adjust the font onto them. Maybe we'll do 14 font. And I'll leave the font as it is. And then the text for each radio button. So that radio button's text should not be radio button 1. So maybe that'll be WS man. So that's ultimately the protocol we're using. I know it's going to be, the commandlets will be sim, that I'll show you once we start putting the logic into this. But WSMan might be a little more recognizable to folks. And WMI over there. All right, so we got our protocols. And let's see here. Let's see. Oh yeah, name them. So that's radio button 1. So do I want to call it radio button 1? Maybe. Right? That's no right or wrong here. So I could leave it as radio button 1. And then WMI radio button 2. I'll tell you, why don't, nah, I can't do it. I can't do it. How about this will be WSMan radio, or radio WSMan, either way. And WMI, that'll be WMI radio. All right. So just to give them some different names, let's see. So next, we're going to need a button. Because basically what I want is someone to put in a computer name in the text box over here, and then hit the button to run the query. All right. So we're going to throw a button, put the button on this side, and maybe we'll make it certain size. If you, I'll leave, I don't know, maybe, do I want button 1? How about run button? All right, and then I certainly don't want the text to be button 1. So let's go find the text, and maybe I'll throw execute in there. If you're a Star Trek fan, put engage. Something like that, and definitely make the font bigger. Let's see what a 14 looks like. Yeah, that's cool. All right. Now, lastly, I'm going to need some output. So I'm going to grab one more item. This will be our last item. And we're going to make a text box. So I'm going to call this, first of all, the font. I definitely want to change the font on this because the output is, I want a nice width proportional font. So Lucida Console is cool for that. So every character takes the same width kind of deal. Size, probably want, maybe we'll start with 12. I can always increase the size on that once it's in PowerShell. It's not that hard. And we need to give it a name. So let's go find the name area, and I'll call this output box, something like that. Right. Which, I'm using that. I should probably go up to this other one here, and I have computer name. Maybe I'll rename that. That'll be input box. So something like that. Oh, and lastly on the output, I gotta find the one that is multi-line. So there we go. So in behavior, you see multi-line right here. That's false. So I'm going to change that over to true. And now if you kind of look at the element, watch the element. I'm going to set it back to false, and notice kind of the edges kind of disappear where you can just adjust it widthwise. All right. But notice once I say multi-line and I change that to true, you can also adjust it this way as well. So maybe we'll maybe put it right there, and then take the outer form and maybe neck that down like that. And there we go. So there is our there's our GUI. All right. So again, that's just how I'm drawing it out. You all are welcome to do your own thing with it, but again, you're just sketching out a GUI. All right. So next up, we're going to need here, we're going to go ahead and do a save on this. So save form, and we're going to ultimately need to now kick out the PowerShell code for this. All right, so if you need to bring back up Solutions Explorer, feel free. and find the form1.designer.cs in Solutions Explorer, right click, and grab the full path, like so. All right. So basically I have that path in there now. All right. So now we're going to bring up the PowerShell console. And in my PowerShell console, if I run get module list available, you will see that I have the ConvertForm module installed. Right? So now let's maybe say our script source is coming from that directory path that I just copied the full text. Again, if you didn't see me do that, I just right-clicked here on the, escape that, on form1.designer.cs, right-clicked, and selected copy full path. That puts the full path in your clipboard. So it gives you where that's going to. And then maybe destination equals, and in my computer, I'm going to dump this into C:\data. And then we're going to use ConvertForm. The path would be $source, the destination, $dest. Encoding in this case is ASCII, so that's one of the parameters on ConvertForm, and we're going to force. Run that. Okay. So now that should have given us, if we go look at that C:\data folder, there's form1.ps1, right? So again, you could, at this point, you can rename it to whatever you feel like. Maybe helpdesk query tool, something like that. And that's going to be our starting point to work with. So I could crack open the ISE, or if you're using Visual Studio Code or something like that, we can open this up, helpdesk query tool, and as you can see, it kind of took everything we had here and basically made objects to represent it in my PowerShell script here. Okay. So now what I want to do is the author of this module added a bit of extra stuff in here. Okay. So you don't particularly have to use that stuff. So typically what I'll do is I'll take line 1 down to line 21 here. This, I know this bit about it. They create a function here. I don't really need that function, so I kind of wipe that out. And then we come down to the end here. And there's a function at the end here. So all of this stuff could be made to go away as well. So highlight and delete. And now you're just basically left with the raw objects that are being created here. And the form was called query1. So all I really have to do now to display that form is we'll call it $form dot show dialog, and that should do it. All right, so go ahead, save, and run the form, and see if it actually displays. Let's see. So what do I need? Oh, geez, I did $forms, $query1. Okay, now save and run the form. There we go. Okay, helps if you call your form by the right variable. All right, and there we go. So there's our form. So we could type in the computer name here, hit execute, and have something happen. We haven't kind of baked that in yet. Our button doesn't do anything, but we could also make sure the radio buttons work. So I can only select one or the other. Um, check boxes work. Okay, so everything looks like the elements of the form are there. All right. So now I can probably tell Visual Studio, thank you, I'm done with you. So we could exit out of Visual Studio. If you want to save the form, maybe you want to come back to it, something like that. That's cool. And we're done with Visual Studio at that point. All right. Now, one thing I noticed when I run the form, when you run this, you're running it from within a PowerShell session, right? So notice, you're kind of executing this. I could also do this in my console here, cd c colon data, and run the form. All right. So there we go. I now close the form by hitting the X, and notice that cancel that's popping up right there. So that's because of that click event where I'm hitting the X. So if I don't want to see that, if I don't want that coming back into the PowerShell session, I can actually just, I could pipe the result of this to out null. And I could do something like that. That doesn't show that. But what I see a lot of other people do with this is they just kind of cast it as a void object. Not noid. These I could type today. Void. And then when I run this now, the form displays. I close the form, and notice you don't see that cancel there. All right. So anyway, so that gets us with a GUI. And now we could build in the logic for this GUI. All right. So typically this part goes at the very end. So in fact, I don't need line 45. Let's put that there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to build in essence, a function that's going to activate when the button is clicked. Right? So in fact, if I wanted to put that there, what did I call my button? Um, run button. Okay, so I can put $run button dot add. Add click is the name of the method. I need something to have it execute. So how about I just call, I'm going to call it something here. What should I call it? What should I name my function that I'm going to make? How about like run query? Give it a PowerShell style name, something like that. Okay, so that's what's going to happen when the button gets clicked. Now I haven't made this yet, so that's where a lot of the logic's going to come in here. So we're basically going to put in function. Run query, open the function, and close the function. Right? And then we're going to put our logic inside of here. So everything I want to happen that's going to appear in that output box is going to go there. All right. So, so let's see. So let's, what do we want to start with? Okay. So the first thing we'll probably need to deal with is we need to get the name of the computer. So that's going to be in the input box. All right. So I called that, that was all the way up here. Yeah, input box. So I'm going to need to grab the name of the computer. All right, so that would be input box dot text. And what I want is I want to put this into, maybe I'll just throw it in my own variable, $PC. So now for the rest of the function, the computer name is in $PC. All right. You don't necessarily need to do that, but I kind of like to do that. Then it kind of normalizes it for me running through. So next thing, I need to see if radio button 1 has been clicked. So what we mean by that is radio button 1, radio button 2, those were the ones that picked the protocol. Right? So let's say we'll do something like an if, and your radio buttons have a property on them called checked, which if the radio button's been clicked, that would be true, is what that would be. Right? So you can kind of use that in an if construct if you wanted to. So dollar dollar WSMan radio dot checked. Right, so that would return true if that was checked. And what do I want to have happen? So what I want is I'm going to set something for my connection here. So I'm going to do $option, which is a variable I'm making up on the spot right now. And we're going to do new sim session option. And we'll set the protocol to WSMan. All right. Cool. And then, and if radio button 1 is not checked, we'll set the option to WMI. Which is not actually labeled as WMI. It's decom, which is so WMI is part of the decom family. Decom family is part of the RPC family. So it's kind of like you know, it's how the protocols work. So this will be using the WMI. This will be using the sim. Right. So yeah, I guess in this way, I'm not even checking the other radio button. Just if the first one's checked, do this, and if not, do the other thing. Basically, you only have 2 radio buttons. So if I had 3 radio buttons, I'd have to build a little more logic into there. But literally here, it's like one or the other. All right. I suppose I could probably, let's not worry about that. Okay. So now I have that. I want to go and connect. All right, so what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to be doing a few different queries to a remote computer to grab different information. So in the repository, I'm going to be querying 3 different classes, if you will. So I don't want to do each of those separately where, you know, the computer goes and makes the connection, does the query, tears down the connection, makes the new connection, does the next query, tears it down for all 3. So I want to, in essence, create a sim session and then run my query through that and then close it down. If you're not familiar with sim sessions, they're kind of like the equivalent of doing a PowerShell remoting session. All right, so I can create that by doing $session equals, and then we're going to do new sim session, computer name, $PC, and session option, $option. All right, so we'll have that in there. And then ultimately, I'm going to do a bunch of stuff, and then I'm going to need to close that. So $, $session, remove sim session. All right. So just kind of remember to do that. All right. So so we've got the logic here now to make the connection, and then ultimately when we're done, remove the connection. All right. So that way we don't have sim session or remoting sessions kind of built up here. All right. So the next thing is we're going to need to grab some information. All right. So now because I, in my GUI, give the choice, let me save this here and let me just run it up. So here, you know, like, so we're grabbing the computer name, whatever's, you know, whatever was entered in here. So that would be input box.text. We got one of these 2 radio buttons going. And we have these check boxes. So theoretically, if nothing is checked, I don't want to grab any information, right? So we're going to ultimately set up some logic there. So how I kind of envision myself doing it is building a property table, a hash table that has whatever properties in it I want, and then being able to create an object out of that and output that object to this output box here. Okay, so let's kind of build it in pieces to start with. All right, so I'm basically going to construct a hash table that has the property I want and the value I want as I go through this, and then if we don't ultimately need it, or when we're actually done constructing it, I guess I should say, then throw it to the output box, right? So let's put that structure in here. So the first thing is we're going to need. So we created our sim session. That's cool. So the next thing is we'll create the property table. I'll just call it $props. That's what I always call my property table. And I'll make it an ordered hash table. And then we'll construct the hash table. And the very first property in here should be the computer name. And I'll set it to $PC. So whatever value is in $PC is now going to be cast into this hash table under, basically under a label called computer name. So basically when you're putting a hash table together, you're making a bunch of name value pairs. And I'm ultimately going to make an object out of that, right? So that gets the first entry. And again, I'll add to that as I go, right? So then at the bottom here, so we could remove the sim session, that's cool. And then we'll put an object together using a new object, type name, we're going to do PS object, and property, my hash table that has my properties in it. And then we're going to output that object to the text box, to the output box. Dollar output box dot text equals, let's see, we're going to take $obj. Now remember, $obj right now is a PowerShell object. It's not text. Okay? It's an actual object. So if anybody's not familiar with what I'm up to here, I'm probably going to put together a non-GUI version of this script because I know a lot of people are not familiar with putting objects together, using sim protocol, using sim sessions, things like that. So I can explain more about that probably in a separate script that's not GUI related. So I'll have a bit more time. Here it's more about just putting the GUI together. So look out for that. I'll probably have that up within a week after this one posts, provided no other life events happen here. And let's do, yeah, let's see. I probably don't need that. All right. So let's do, actually, no, I do. Let's do that and that. Okay. So yeah, so let's try that out. Let me save this. All right. Now in my lab environment, I have a separate computer called Client 2 that's up and running. So let me try is running this. Let's throw Client 2 in there. We're going to use WSMan, and we're going to execute. All right. And that's what we get. Ooh, sweet. All right. So it's at least outputting, right? We're somewhere, right? So we saw some action there. That's cool. Okay. So now, let's see. Do I want to? Let's maybe. I don't really need this in the end, but let me see if that. Because what's happening here? Let me run this. This is just a Hail Mary here, just to. Oh, geez, you idiot. Format list. Yeah. Save that. Run it again. Client 2, WSMan. Okay, there we go. So what I wanted is ultimately I want the properties on the left and I want the data on the right. So if you don't do the format list, what happens is PowerShell makes up its own mind. So if you're displaying an object with 4 properties or less, PowerShell makes a table out of it, which you saw, at the first time I ran this. And if it's 5 or more properties, it'll make a list. So, but I just maybe want to force that to be list all the time. So even if there's just one property, it still looks the same. All right. And I saw one other issue when I ran it, client 2, WSMan, that it throws in 2 blank lines here. I don't like that. So there's a common method with string objects called trim start, and that should get rid of the blank lines at the beginning. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that. Client 2, WSMan. Cool. Okay, so there we go. So now we're rocking and rolling. And the other reason why, when I did the output here, I picked Lucida Console is with that font, spaces and characters, they all take an equal amount of width. So if you're building like a column here, it all looks the same. Okay, if you picked like, I don't know, Arial or Sigu or something like that, each character is its own width. Like spaces are a lot narrower than actual like characters are. So when you're trying to line everything up, it looks like garbage. So that's why, like with the output box, I specifically went with Lucida Console. And I got the 12 there. I could change that if I wanted it bigger or smaller. So kind of adjust that as needed. All right. So anyway, um, so now, so great. I didn't actually query that computer at all. I mean, well, I didn't use any data that came back from it. Let's put it that way. So I opened a session and closed the session. Sweet. So now let's try putting some data in there. Okay. So what I want here is I want to see if each of the checkboxes has been checked. So you could easily do that just by doing an if. So if OS dollar, let's see, dollar OS check, because that's what I called the first checkbox, OS check dot checked. So that'll return a true, and then I want to run something, right? So the first thing is we need to go query. So $OS equals, and we're going to do get sim instance. The class I'm going to want is Win32 operating system. And sim session, $session. And then we're going to start putting some stuff in our property table. Um, so when you query Win32 operating system, it returns like a whole bunch of properties and values, right? So I'm just calling those particular properties and values. I know what they are, okay? So if some of you are a bit light on the repository classes, again, I'll put together probably pretty soon here a PowerShell script, no GUI, just a straight PowerShell script with like parameters and stuff, part of my Build a Script series, um, explaining more about this stuff. So here we're just kind of about the GUI, right? So I'm going to grab some information out of that object. So this is returning the object from this query, so it's going to have a whole bunch of properties in it. And I want to grab some specific properties out of there. Oops, that was $OS. So I want to grab some specific properties out of there. So I'm going to grab my hash table, and I'm going to use the... I cannot type today. Dollar props, and I'm going to call the add method out of it. So I'm going to add a property called OS version, and then we're going to set that to $OS dot version. Okay, so boom. So that'll add one thing in, right? And basically what we're going to do here is we're going to dupe this line a bunch of times. I want to add a few other things. So we're going to do probably the build. And that's $os dot build number. Let's see, let's add another one. How about we'll do just SP, and that is going to call a property called service pack major version. And oops, I don't need that. Let's do one more. I want maybe just the OS, and that'll be $os dot caption. All right. So in essence, what I'm doing here, I'll just kind of show you real quick. Do a get sim instance class Win32 operating system, and then let's just display all the properties. So if you notice here, there's see caption right there. So what did I have? Service pack major version. I had the build number right there. Okay, so just grabbing, some different pieces, out of this data coming back. Okay, so if you're wondering where I'm getting these things from, version, build number, service pack major version, caption, those are properties in the object returned from this query, right, which is currently in $os. Right. So now that adds those to that property table. So let me save this and let's see if that's in fact going to output correctly. So we'll run the GUI, client 2, WSMan, run. Oops, I didn't check off my box. There we go. There we go. Cool. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So OS version, build, service pack, and OS. Cool. And that is indeed what client 2 is. Windows 10 Enterprise, long-term servicing channel. All right. Okay, cool. So that grabs that. Now we want to maybe just grab this whole thing here and just duplicate it. All right, and this time, what was the next checkbox? Comp check. That's the name of it. Okay. So let's go and say if check to get some instance, and this one will now be Win32 computer system. And the properties we're going to want, we're going to want to put that in a different variable. So maybe that'll be since this is computer system, maybe put that in $CS. And then props, let's see. So I want make and model. So let's maybe do model equals $CS dot model. Let's see the next one here. Manufacturer $CS dot. Probably quicker just to type it, but anyway, $CS dot manufacturer. Maybe I want the core count. So let's do cores, and that would be $CS dot. Let's see, number of logical processors. And then procs $CS dot number of processors, and yeah, So maybe that's cool there. And then let's see. So last one, we want, let's say maybe some drive info. Right. So again, I mean, you could, I mean, it's, you know, it's no hard and fast rule here of what we're looking for. So let's grab some of this. And this one, what did I call that checkbox? Disk check. And then we'll do something if that's checked. Okay. So what we're probably going to do is we're going to just need to do another query. And this one, maybe we'll call dollar drive. I did disk. I'd stick with disk. All right. So dollar disk equals get Simmons at 132 underscore logical disk. All right. And with that, I could then create dollar props dot add, and I'm going to add a property called free space. And then what's going in it? Dollar disk dot free space. Something like that, and close that off. Okay, so that's let's say so using 3 of the different checkboxes, put them all up here. You can see if OS is checked, we do this. If computer checked is this, and if disk checked, we're doing this. I mean, granted, I could add some other properties in here, but figure just do one here. It's all we really need just to prove that it's actually working here. Let's save this. Run it. Client 2, WSMan. Let's say I just want OS info. There's the OS info, computer info, cool, and then lastly disk info. Sweet. So we have that. Let's say if I don't want computer info, or I don't want OS info, and if I want those two, there we go. And I don't think WMI is going to work. I don't think I have, maybe. Yeah, no, it's locked right now. So yeah, WMI doesn't work in my environment. So I probably should have put some error handling in to, maybe output something else like that protocol doesn't work. So yeah, in fact, that locked up the tool. All right. So anyway, but that gets us running. That will eventually time itself out. But that gets us going with a quick GUI here to go query some help desk info from a remote computer. All right. So I apologize, I can't show all the code in one window here. There's a bit here. But what I can do is take this code as it is presented, everything I just typed here, and host it up. So I will have a link where you could go get the code from. And again, I could build more structure into this given the time. Right? But again, this is more about building the GUI than anything else. So if anybody's interested, like I said, I'll probably put a non-GUI version of this script where I do a lot more stuff to it. So for instance, like what if you have more than one hard disk? This is not going to work. Okay, so you could build logic into there that queries the C drive. So you'd have to specify what the C drive is. You could build logic into there. The other thing is here, when I query the disk info, it's giving me the free space in bytes. Okay? That's not cool. So we can convert that over to gigabytes, for instance. So there is room to improve here, but this at least puts a GUI together that we can start with. So again, I'll put together a script, non-GUI version of this that kind of breaks this down, puts a little more detail into it about, classes, how to query them, things like that. So be on the lookout for that. I'll probably have that up within a week or two. Um, and again, so here's the script. Any questions, comments, feel free to give me a shout in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, please consider doing a like and subscribe. It, like I said, it greatly helps the growth of the channel, and I certainly do appreciate it. So with that, have a good one, everybody, and we'll see you in the next video.